Reading, writing, and red zones. We are talking about COVID-19 and the effect on education in South Texas right now, in the past, and where we're going in the future. It's our live town hall conversation that we're going to have from 6:30 until 8 o'clock. The first part is online and on air here on KSAT 12, where it is in conjunction with Trinity University. I want to welcome Dr. Enrique Aleman, the Director of Educational Leadership, that program at Trinity University. Dr. Aleman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start with, put yourself in the position of superintendents in the many different school districts that we have. Are you between a rock and a hard place right now when you see that we're in the red zone when it comes to Metro Health asking schools to go to virtual learning, but the TEA telling schools they can't go to virtual learning right now or they could be punished financially?
Yeah, they're in quite a precarious situation, and they've really been in that situation since March. Really, when this started in March, it's been evolving, and they've had to really adapt and continue to shift their strategies. And so they are in a situation where they're having to advocate for their communities, and they're having to take the best health and academic needs under consideration for the students and the families that they work with. At the same time, you have a state legislature, a state government that is really putting the mandates down pretty hard on them. So they're having to adapt as they go and as we go into 2021.
We also heard the argument from a lot of superintendents yesterday saying that a lot of transmission is not necessarily happening in schools. Again, to that question and to piggyback off of Steve's question, how do you balance those two things? And as they're looking into the spring semester and how to move forward after Christmas, what should they be looking at as they make those decisions?
That's a great question. I mean, I think when we work with our students, and we have a lot of great partnerships with our school districts here around Bexar County, the more that you can include different constituencies as part of that conversation. I mean, I think teachers need to be part of that conversation. Obviously, parents and families need to be part of that conversation. And as much as possible, especially in high school level, bring in youth to really have conversations about ways of moving forward. Schools at the heart are parts of our community. They're actually the center of our community. And the more that we can kind of build community by having conversations about ways of moving forward, I think that's just a great way of doing it.
See, I love the fact that you brought up those different factions up, because we're going to have parents, we're going to have teachers, we're going to have administrators, obviously professors, educators, as part of this conversation tonight. But, you know, you're also talking about just in San Antonio, just in the San Antonio area, you talked about being advocates for the community. I mean, you've got so many different school districts here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think 17 different school districts that touch Bexar County, and they're all very diverse, have very different demographics. Obviously, San Antonio historically has come from segregation, school inequity, kinds of concerns, and so I think that those are lingering effects that we continue to deal with. I still have a lot of hope, though. I mean, I think, you know, it feels like people are coming together and there's more of a conversation happening, and really getting back to the basics. At the core, education's about caring. It's about humanizing. It's a humanizing business, if anything. It's about relationship building. And so this time period that we're living through has made it very difficult in the sense that we're not together. And the more that we can do, you know, use virtual means, but also as we come out of the pandemic, figure out ways to continue to build our communities, and schools are being a major part of that.
You mentioned school inequities, and I want to touch on that really quickly. You know, school districts are so different and diverse, not only in terms of the makeup of the schools and those districts, but also in terms of resources. What advice and guidance can you share for school leaders of underprivileged communities, maybe those who don't have that wide access to technologies and things like that during the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, San Antonio is really the center of a lot of the school funding, school inequity cases that have come out from the state. The families and the communities here have always fought and advocated for more equity. Without having a bunch of money coming your way, I think one way that we look at it is, you know, our families and our students and our history is part of our wealth. How do we tap into those resources, family resources, community knowledge? As we ask the legislature to continue to fund our schools the way they should be funded, there's also these types of assets, community cultural wealth and community cultural assets that are part of San Antonio. That's another kind of way of kind of tapping into that resource.
We're going to continue our conversation with Dr. Enrique Aleman, and we're going to add a student to the conversation as well when we come back. Jaelen, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hi.
Hey, Jaelen, it's Steve Spriester and EC Romero. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Just calling my way through finals.
Oh.
A good note.
Oh man, we got you on finals week?
Not quite yet, but
Okay, all right.
we're getting there.
I'm just making
Awesome.
sure. So we want you to give the student perspective on this whole thing. You know, what it's been like for you as we go through this unprecedented time. So we've got a little time left here in the break. Dr. Aleman from Trinity is also with us with the educational leadership program. So we're going to start with you when we come back.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, thanks, Jaelen.
All right. I thought we.
Welcome back. We just heard before the break a little bit from Dr. Enrique Aleman, who is director of the Educational Leadership Program at Trinity University. We want to bring someone else into the conversation right now. We want to introduce you to Jaelen Harris. He is a Trinity senior and Student Government Association president. Jaelen, thank you so much for joining us. We know you're studying for finals right now, so we appreciate your time. And I just want to start with a question on a lot of students' minds. What has remote learning been like for you during this pandemic?
Remote learning, I mean, to be quite honest, it's different. It's not quite like being in the classroom. And I think that I'm encouraged by the professors, the administrators that I've spoken to, been in the classroom with, who are leading this moment with compassion, the moment that students are in. And I think that across the board, top down, that should be the attitude of all institutions, including Trinity. So I'm definitely encouraged by the professors that I've come across, but I definitely feel for those students and want to give a voice to those students who might feel that that has not been their experience in the classroom, and really get that message out there.
This is not, I'm guessing, how you envisioned your senior year at Trinity University. I mean, you're the president of the Student Association as well, is that right?
Yes, I am.
So, I mean, how have you been coping, and what is helping you through this very unusual senior year of yours?
Me personally, I come from a Baptist background, so I have faith in wherever I am, I'm meant to be. Whatever I'm going through, I can look at it and say, this too shall pass. But it is tough, and I want to give voice to that. It's tough. And one thing that's definitely sustained me is just keeping up with friends from a distant way, talking on the phone with them, and just really
Jaelen, we're having
holding.
a little trouble. We're having a little trouble hearing you. I don't know if something might have covered your microphone there or something. Try it again.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, much better.
Okay.
Sorry,
great.
start again and tell me how you're getting through this. I mean, obviously your faith, you said, is a big part.
Just really focusing in on trying to finish out this year strong. I really can't give um, it's hard to give advice to anyone out there that's going through the same situation, because we all handle and are handling this situation differently. And so for me, it's just been a lot of isolation, finding things I like to watch on TV, discovering new things. But even in the middle of that, it is definitely still tough.
You mentioned that a lot of people are handling this differently. As the president of the Student Government Association, what message do you have to other college students, not just at Trinity, but throughout San Antonio?
One thing I want to say is that we all know what we need to do, and we all know right from wrong, and getting a control over this situation is up to us. So we need to continue to focus on physical distancing, wearing a mask, trying to limit how much we travel. And one thing that I'll say is that our best tool that we have, especially for us college age students, is that we are the best at convincing each other. And so we need to continue to peer pressure, remind our friends to be safe, not only for themselves, but for those around them. I definitely feel for the amount of loss that so many families out there are feeling right now. I mean, it's hard to put words to it. But I think that's why we need to all focus on doing our part and trying to do it better, not only for ourselves again, but for each other.
We're all in this together. Jaelen Harris, senior at Trinity University. Stay with us. We're going to take another break. We'll be right back.
So
Hey, Jaelen, can you hear us? For some reason, when you're speaking, your microphone sounds a little muffled. We can still make out what you're saying, but it sounds muffled. Can you just give us a quick check, maybe count to 10 real quick?
1, 2, 3, 4,
That sounds
5.
better. Right?
That sounds much better. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just try to speak with a little bit more force. That might be my fault.
I mean, you're a politician, man. You won student government. I mean, you should project.
I'll definitely focus on that. Thank you.
No, we're good. We're good. I appreciate you taking the time to check that mic for us. We are back now with a quick segment with Dr. Enrique Aleman from Trinity University, the Director of Educational Leadership, and Jaelen Harris, who is a senior at Trinity University. Dr. Aleman, what do you want people at home to know tonight?
I think that, Jaelen mentioned it earlier. I mean, I think there are certain steps that we can take to, really help our community get through this. And the more that we can kind of follow those steps and think of our neighbors, everybody's struggling right now. San Antonio, we've seen the food lines, we've seen how people have struggled across the city. The more that we can kind of come together as a community, I think we can get through this and moving forward. I think for educators and educational leaders, they're planners by nature. And with all this uncertainty, they're trying to do the best that they can. I talk to principals all the time. They're really struggling. They're tired, but they have the community at heart, and they're trying to do the best that they can to get through this and get our communities through it.
Jaelen, I want to ask my next question to you. Can you give our viewers or offer our viewers some perspective on what campus life looks and feels like right now? Are most of the kids virtual or some on campus? Kind of walk us through what it's like right now.
Yeah, so here at Trinity, we do have a hybrid model where we are offering some courses in person, and so I've actually attended some in-person classes, and it's very different. Everyone, of course, is wearing their mask when appropriate, and being in the classroom, there's a bit more silence to it than it normally is. I think one thing that this moment reminds us is that it's those passing moments with our friends, seeing each other in the classroom that really sustains us, that really plays a role in our performance in the classroom, our mental health, our attitude just toward learning in general. And so I think that we all need to dig deep inside of ourselves and really band together and fight our way through this. But as far as on campus, it does look different, but we are doing our best.
I want to remind you that this is a conversation that we want you to be a part of too. Those of you who are watching on KSAT, on KSAT.com, or on the Tiger Network, on Trinity's website. We all want you to join in this conversation. We've got some great questions coming in. Again, at 7 o'clock, we're going to continue this online only on KSAT.com and on the Trinity Network. We will be joined by 3 other panelists who will give us their perspective on how this whole thing is shaping up. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back. Okay.
Hello.
Is this everyone? We have 3?
No,
We're missing.
I only see 3.
Okay.
Okay.
Who do we have?
I'm here.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you say your names just so we know we can identify who everyone is?
I'm Diana Kenny.
Diana. Okay, perfect.
Hi, Diana. Thank you for joining us.
And Rocio, is that Rocio Delgado?
It's Rocio Delgado.
Rocio,
Yes.
okay.
Rocio, great. I'm Steve Spriester. Isis Romero's with me. For this last segment here, we're going to bring everybody in, and we have a few minutes here, and I really want to ask the question. There are people that are wondering, is it safe? Do you feel confident it's safe to send kids back to school right now? I know it's a loaded question. Is there any one of you that would feel better taking this particular question? Or do you want me to just have Tess Coody-Anders, who's not on yet, give her this question because she's the last one in?
Yes. Yes.
Is she gonna join us? Okay.
Okay. I think we have her. There's Tess.
Hi, all.
Hey,
Hi.
Tess, how are you?
Hi. I'm sorry, I was in the other room watching Jaelen and Enrique.
Yeah. Good.
Great job.
You know, I gave the question to the rest of the panelists, and none of them wanted to touch it. So I said, okay, whoever's in last has to take this question.
There you go. That's my job.
But the question is, I mean, we've been getting a lot of questions over the last few days about, should I feel safe sending my kid back to school?
Sure.
And I think that goes for any school.
I can help. I can help answer that for higher education. I'm not sure I have a handle on K-12, but I can definitely answer that for higher ed.
Yeah.
Tess, and I can follow with elementary if you like.
Awesome, Rocio.
That would be great.
That what we can do also, is we can provide these are the questions that I would ask as a parent of my institution of higher education in order to feel confident sending them back to school. Does that make sense?
Yep. So this is the last segment of the 6. Then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and basically start all over again from 7 to 8. So, but we'll introduce you first. We'll introduce all the panelists first coming out. We're about 15 seconds away.
Welcome back to our COVID conversations. We have just heard from Dr. Enrique Aleman and Jaelen Harris with Trinity University. We are now joined by 3 new panelists. We can introduce them really quickly. We have Tess Coody-Anders, who is Vice President of Strategic Communications and Marketing. We've also got Rocio Delgado, Associate Professor of Education and Director of the Empatico program, as well as Diana Kenny, who is Interim Director of the Education School Psychology program. Thank you again to our panelists for joining us this evening.
Our focus, education and COVID, and a question that we've been getting over and over online, even as this live stream has been going, is, should I feel safe sending my kids back to school right now? And Tess, I know that you wanted to, I'm giving you first crack at this, or putting you on the hot seat first here to talk about this from a higher education standpoint.
Sure. Happy to do that. I mean, as a parent of college-age children, students, myself, I understand that concern. And, I think in San Antonio, what I've seen from our peer institutions that each are doing an exceptional job of putting the programs and initiatives in place to create a safe environment. But there are some questions that I would ask wherever I'm sending my student. And the first is, what are the multi-layered things that the institution is doing to mitigate the spread of the disease and to catch it early and then contain it? And so the kinds of questions you want to ask are, what sorts of early warning systems do you have? Are you asking students, faculty, and staff to do a health check, a health screening every day, and then asking them not to come to campus or admit them to campus if they fail that health check? Are you doing multiple kinds of testing? For example, surveillance testing, where you're kind of looking to catch the virus early in your population, as well as symptomatic or on-demand testing on your campus? And then what kinds of quarantine, isolation, and contact tracing programs do you have in place? So it's really critical that a university or a college has some resources, internal or external, that help contact trace, almost like a little town. We've been calling it Town Trinity. So it's our responsibility to contact trace any exposure or positive case to try to ensure the safety of anyone impacted. And so having aggressive resources in place to do that. And then lastly, once students have to, should you have to be in quarantine because you were exposed or isolate because you've become positive, do you have the clinical team and clinical resources to ensure that a student's daily needs and clinical needs are being met? And so just ask those questions and make sure you understand where those resources are coming from and how they're being delivered. And now that we have an entire fall to look back on, you can ask for a track record on that. And I think if you can get the right answers to those questions, you can feel as confident as anyone would or could sending your student to school. And at the end of the day, what I've heard from epidemiologists is, this is going to be with us for a while. It'll take a little while for the vaccine to begin to be implemented and take effect. And we have to live our lives. And we don't want to let our educations and, the incredible career that individuals like Jaelen are going to have be put on hold. And so let's work together to put the safety mechanisms and mitigation strategies in place to keep moving on and keep moving forward.
We have so much ground to cover tonight. We are just getting started. Our conversation is going to move online here at the 7 o'clock hour. We're going to be from 7 to 8. We invite you to send us some questions, either on social media. I know on the Trinity University website, we're also fielding some questions. So please join us as our conversation continues online on KSAT.com.
We'll see you back here on the Night Beat at 10. And of course, we're going to go to KSAT.com and Trinity's website right after the break.
I thought you said that was the last segment. You just said it was the last segment.
Dude.
I thought we were ending the show because I would have asked her another question. Are we not ending the show?
No, I thought you said to bring it in the break before the last break. So
I specifically asked if this was the last break.
I thought it was the last break too.
Is it the last
All right,
break or is it?
it's not.
Just so you know,
Okay.
we do not, guys, we do not have a ticker. So I can't see the time.
Oh, there's no, okay. There's no more breaks after this one, right? There's 40 seconds to say bye.
All right.
Okay.
I lied. We have 40 seconds that we're coming back and
They told
saying
us it was the end of
goodbye.
the show, so
They
we
told
were
us it
wrapping
was the
it.
end of the show. We were wrapping, and it wasn't. So
All right, we got this. We can roll with it.
it's the beauty of live television
Yeah.
here.
That's right.
can tell. All right, so we have 45 seconds left in the show, so we're not going to ask a question. You guys are just going to have to, you're like our Brady Bunch panelists there on the big screen here. So we're going to do that, and then we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and I'll do a reopen for the online stuff.
Sounds good.
Okay.
COVID and its effect on education in our community is what we're going to be talking about tonight as we continue this conversation online. We're joined by 5 very esteemed panelists who will be taking your questions and our questions and kind of leading us through the conversation this evening into how this pandemic is being dealt with in our classrooms.
Yeah, and we certainly appreciate your time for joining us. Again, this conversation is going to move online right now to KSAT.com. Send us your questions. We've received quite a few already that are really good. So again, send us your questions and we will pose those to the panelists.
See you on the Night Beat at 10. Reading, writing, and red zones. Education in a pandemic has become a delicate balancing act between safety and learning and making sure no one is left behind. Tonight, with the help of Trinity University, we examine the questions that surround navigating a pandemic for those in pre-K all the way to college. How parents can be involved, how students and educators can stay safe, and what does our education system look like post-pandemic? COVID and the classroom. A KSAT conversation continues now.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Isis Romero. Welcome to this live stream discussion on COVID-19 and its effects on education. We are showing this, of course, on our website right now, KSAT.com, and the Trinity University website. And we want to welcome everyone, of course, that's joining us.
We also want you to be part of this conversation by sending us your questions as we go through the next hour. But first, let's meet our special guests. We're going to go top row to bottom row here, and we're going to start with Dr. Enrique Aleman, who is the Director of Educational Leadership, the program there at Trinity.
We've also got Jaelen Harris. He is a Trinity senior and Student Government Association president. Dr.
Rocio Delgado, the Associate Professor of Education and the Director of the Empatico program.
And we've got Diana KENNEY, Interim Director of the Education School Psychology program.
And Tess Coody-Anders, the Vice President of Strategic Communications and Marketing at Trinity University. So we ended on air with a question about how do I know it's safe to send my kid back to school? And Tess, you answered the question from higher education and gave some great tips on how people can make sure that their schools are being safe and have the protocols in place. Dr. Delgado, I want to talk to you from more of a elementary high school type perspective. What should parents feel safe sending their kids back, and what questions should they be asking?
Well, as a parent of elementary school age children, deciding whether to send your kids back to school is a huge challenge we have encountered in their schooling experience during COVID times. You know, I wear both the personal and the professional hat. So I would say that the first challenge is making a decision whether to send your kids back to school. Professionally, I have the privilege of certain amount of flexibility in what I do in my teaching position here at the university, but it is also my responsibility to provide support to students who are learning to become teachers. So having to send my own children to school was not an easy decision, but we did it. And everyone at their school is amazing at following protective measures. And hey, shout out to Spriester Elementary. So I think that gets us into, you know, the kinds of questions that you want to ask and what you want to look for. So make sure that teachers, students, the district is following all of the protective measures. We know that schools are monitoring temperatures for anyone coming into the school building. There are scans that are completed prior to entering the building. So teachers completing these scans, families asked to complete a scan, answering questions, you know, about whether they've been in contact with someone who has been diagnosed with COVID or if they have traveled internationally. So, you know, completing those scans prior to entering the building. I get the question a lot about, you know, what do schools look like? What do elementary schools look like? You know, what does the classroom look like? And it looks very different, but they're still very happy places where lots of learning is taking place. Students, as we know, are very resilient, and you know, the desks, everything does look different. There's a plexiglass that's being used, or dividers for students to remain in their individual spots. There's the social distancing, and teachers are ensuring that students are washing their hands a lot, that they're using their hand sanitizer. So when you think about classroom routines and procedures that you see, the classroom jobs are now including things like the hand sanitizing queen, Miss Science. You know, I learned that from you. You may have a student who's a hand sanitizing queen, or you may have a social distance monitor. And, you know, teachers are having to teach students a set of routines and procedures that are totally different from what you would have expected any other year. And I know that I'm not really giving you a clear answer, because it is a very personal decision, and one that you have to make based on what the needs of your family are. There are families that do not have the privilege of keeping their children at home because of their, you know, circumstances, because they have to work. So they are sending their kids to school, and just making sure that all the safety procedures are being followed.
Yeah, I also want to point out that we've had people tell us from the school districts that they're not seeing a lot of transmission in the schools themselves, that a lot of it is outside of the school. So we haven't seen that in a lot of the school districts. So I just want to piggyback kind of on your point, Dr. Delgado, with that.
Yeah, no, one of the things that we're asking our viewers to do and the public to do is to submit their questions. And I want to get to one of those questions right now. This one comes from Christy Boyd. She says, as a teacher, I'm concerned about the impact of masks on the development of children and teacher-student relationships. When will it be safe enough for schools to skip masks again? Diana, I want to pose this question to you. I know that it's hard to have a crystal ball and predict when it's going to be safe again to go without masks, but can you talk to us about the impact on kids and that teacher-student relationship with the mask wearing and some of the procedures that we have in place?
Sure. I can't necessarily speak to the safety question there about when it will be safe to stop wearing them. I can speak to the issue of communication through a mask and how impactful that's been on students, and the communication between teachers and student to student. You know, we communicate, you know, with our mouth, both in expressive ways and through our oral language. And so when you're wearing a mask, it's very hard to sort of gauge people's feelings and thoughts, and you know, sort of that nonverbal communication is lost through that mask. So I think we all have a lot of concerns about what's happening in developmentally and educationally for students because of the mask wearing and you know, the inability to see and to read facial expressions and things like that because of the mask. It's definitely a huge concern. You know, even more so, I think, you know, I'm in the special education world, and for students with who struggle with that already. That's, an added layer of difficulty trying to communicate and help students with disabilities through a mask.
And just to follow up on that, is there anything that teachers, any guidance or advice that you'd be giving teachers on things and ways to combat that?
Without breaking safety protocol, there's really not a ton of options. They do make masks that have clear windows over the mouth. Those can be helpful. I've heard from many teachers the challenges that they fog up and that they only work for a limited amount of time before the fogginess sort of prevents being able to see the mouth through the mask. But that is something that I know a lot of teachers are trying. Clear safety shields behind a plexiglass is something that teachers are using as well. There's really no foolproof method for it. I think, everybody's so highly concerned, obviously, about the safety issue of transmission that, this is prevented with the actual mask, that I think that just kind of comes first right now. And they do the best they can with, finding masks that don't prohibit speech, as much as possible. And, I think clear language is a priority, second only to the safety concern of transmission through the mask.
Diane, I want to stay with you because you brought up the fact that you do teach special education students and their teachers. How are special needs students and their parents coping with remote learning during a pandemic? I'm certainly sure that that's something that they never thought they would have to deal with. And here we are, like in so many things in 2020, here we are dealing with it.
Yeah, it's definitely an added concern for students with special needs, that they receive additional supports at school, in addition to the regular instruction that all kids receive. They're also receiving additional supports, therapy and things like that, which, initially came to a halt in March when schools closed. A lot of those things were not, we weren't able to provide those services virtually. Luckily, with some time through the summer and the beginning of fall, we did find some ways to provide those services virtually if necessary for those students who might also have medical conditions that prevent them from going to school. But for the most part, schools in our area prioritized in-person learning for students with disabilities. So most of our students with disabilities were the first students to get to go back on campus because of the additional support that they need. And the therapies that they, often come with their specialized programming. Those kinds of things need to be delivered in a small group or even one-to-one. So, it was particularly hard for those students who were identified with disabilities.
There's been so much excitement and anticipation about the vaccine that is coming. Tomorrow we are anticipating the approval and then the subsequent rollout of that vaccine here locally. Tess, I want to ask this next question to you. What impact do you think that the vaccine will have on Trinity's plans for the spring and beyond?
It's a critical dependency. We track closely when and if that will be available in the spring semester, or are we looking at the summer or the fall, because it affects so many things. How many students can we have living on campus? Can we have them living in more than one room? Can we begin to restore some normalcy to the classroom? The vaccine, a lot hinges on that vaccine. I will say that we track closely with Metro Health. They've done just a wonderful job communicating with us and being a strong partner. And they're very honest with us about what we can expect when. We would love to see that vaccine available in April so that, or mid-semester, so that we can actually be on track to start the fall semester probably in a stronger position. I think right now, the reality is, at least with the current situation with vaccine availability and distribution, we've been told not to expect that kind of availability till late summer, maybe early fall for the general population, which means us and our students. So we do contingency planning. We plan for the ideal to, the most dire. And our students, Jaelen as the Student Government Association president, student leaders have been incredibly flexible about working with us on changing course on a dime. And unfortunately, that's the impact that the uncertainty around the vaccine has for us. But if we get that vaccine, we feel really confident that we'll quickly be able to begin to quickly return to some sense of normalcy.
Tess, we've talked about the fact that this obviously it's a health issue it's an economy issue, it's an education issue. When you look at Trinity University as an institution, how has the pandemic affected your enrollment numbers and the financial health of an institute like Trinity University?
You know, we are not dissimilar from every college and university. Of the 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States, I don't think any have been untouched by the impacts of the pandemic. We are fortunate in that our enrollment numbers for this year were tracked pretty close to what we were anticipating. The challenges are we couldn't have all of our students live on campus, and that has honestly a financial impact on universities that are highly residential. Also, what we find is economically, students need more help right now. You know, families are really struggling and suffering, and there's a big gap. We perceive a big gap in sort of pandemic endurance. And for those families that are sort of on the other side of the gap, we have to be available to provide a lot more help financially and otherwise to help them get to a school like Trinity and to get a Trinity education, and that's expensive. So we've definitely seen budget challenges, and we anticipate seeing those not just this year, but there's a sustained effect to this, a momentum to this effect that even beyond a vaccine, we anticipate experiencing that, you know, for several years to come. Families are not going to recover overnight, and we've got to be available with the help to make that happen. And that means, you know, we have to do better and with less, do more with less at Trinity, so we can make more available to students, and it's going to be impactful.
I'm curious, and you may not be able to answer this question, but are you seeing applicants now that have great grades pre-pandemic and their grades have fallen off after the pandemic? I mean, I don't know how closely you communicate with the admissions department, but are you able to answer that question?
Yeah, you know, I will say I can tell you this, we have, all indications are we have an incredibly strong applicant pool, but also enrollment counselors, admissions counselors at universities like ours are, and the counselors in high schools and students on college track, you know, there's an understanding of what's been going on and what folks have been dealing with from an admissions standpoint. And so now more than ever, it's important that admissions looks at students very holistically. GPA is certainly important to us. Trinity is a you know, a very, you know, lots of gifted students like Jaelen come to Trinity, but fortunately we look at a lot of other things too. So while I can't say that we've seen a particular drop off in GPA, I can say that we've had to look much more holistically at applicants, as is the right thing to do. As you may know, we, among many of other schools, have waived the SAT or ACT as a necessary part of the application process, and we're going to continue to do that for 3 years. So that was to where we'd been talking about it pre-pandemic, but the pandemic was the perfect time to trial that.
I want to move on and talk a little bit about communities of color. And Dr. Delgado, I want to pose this question to you. How is remote learning affecting communities of color? We know that the Black and Hispanic communities have been hit hard and are most at risk in this pandemic. So talk to us about how this pandemic has affected those students specifically.
COVID has definitely exacerbated the inequities in terms of not only who had access to think about accessing the internet, right? I mean, there's remote learning. So who has access to the internet or other resources, but also in terms of who learns what or the amount of supports that children receive. For a variety of there's different reasons, but not all families can provide support when it comes to maybe helping their child with homework. So some of those students who may not have a parent at home during remote instruction to help them have fallen behind. As Diana mentioned, the students with high need were given priority for going back to in-person learning. So when you think about your English learners and students who have special needs, because we know that that's the student population that needs more support to be successful. They need more specialized services. They may need speech language services, for example, or require testing in specific areas. So when you think about children, I'm actually thinking of one specific child who was scheduled for special education testing back in the spring, and that hasn't yet happened, and we don't really know when that's going to happen. So I think I just want to go back to the fact that the inequities, it is students that need the most help, that continue to fall behind with remote learning because they do not have the amount of support that's needed. So yes, that's.
So I want to open it up, let the panel know if there's anybody else that wants to jump in on some of these questions. Go ahead once the person we talk on is done. But Dr. Delgado, we talked last week about the kind of inequality of access across and health outcomes across the city of San Antonio in our COVID panel last week. Are you seeing that apply to school districts as well in lower income neighborhoods?
What I have seen is that districts are doing a phenomenal job in trying to reach out to every single parent and every single child. We know that there are parents who, again, I talked about the homework, may not have, the ability to help their child with homework. Districts are coming up with tutoring programs, homework help programs after school, all done remotely, of course. School districts provided hotspots for families who didn't, have access to Wi-Fi. In terms of other, we're talking about education, but I'm also thinking, basic needs. You think about partnerships that have been formed with the San Antonio Food Bank, to make sure that students and families, have food on the table, that they have clothing. So I have seen districts do an amazing job at, continuing to reach out to the communities that are most in need and continuing to work with parents one-on-one to walk them through how to use the many different learning platforms that we are now using with remote learning, how to continue to communicate with parents to make sure that they know what it is that their children are supposed to be working on. So that's what I have seen.
There are some, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to feed off of that. Dr. Delgado is absolutely right. Like, educators and educational leaders have always known there's been inequities in our systems. What the pandemic has done is just further shine the light on how structural these inequalities are. Because education is very interconnected with healthcare. Healthcare is very interconnected with food security, unemployment, housing, and so all these systems are very much interconnected, and teachers and principals and administrators are the ones at their front door every morning are having to make sense of this and having to serve their students. If anything educators do, they're first and foremost about community building, and they see everything, and so I would just want us to continue to say what kinds of supports can we provide for the people that are doing the work. And as I mentioned during the earlier hour, like, people are tired. They've been on the go since March. And, we're going into a legislative session. I really hope that we can continue to provide the supports that teachers need and that families need, because it's not, I'm not one of those that's, I'm happy about the vaccine, but we're still arguing about whether people should wear masks. So Are you going to require people to take the vaccine before they come back to school? I mean, is that going to be a requirement? They don't want to be required. A lot of people don't want to be required to wear a mask. So this is not a one-shot deal. I hope we can continue to educate and inform. People can make choices based on the information and the science and the data. And I hope, that we can act as a collective, as a community, to make sure that we're protecting our neighbors and doing this. Everybody wants to come out of this pandemic, out of this quarantine. So the way we do that is by educating and informing, so that families and young people and our neighbors can make these decisions.
Dr. Aleman, you just mentioned that people are tired. No one's going to argue with you there. But there's been so much focus on the students in this conversation. What about the teachers? How do you think that COVID is impacting teachers in the classroom? Dr. Delgado, I want to pose that one to you.
Well, I am a teacher educator. And as a teacher educator, I think about the two groups of teachers with whom I work. And in our Master of Arts in Teaching program, we pair up our teachers in training. We call them intern teachers or student teachers. We pair them up with experienced mentor teachers in local schools. So COVID impacts both in-service experienced teachers and young students who are learning to become teachers. So when you look at the in-service, the more experienced teachers, they are constantly having to readjust what they do in the classroom. In terms of planning, they have to prepare for what students will be doing if they are face-to-face in school, and how classes will be taught remotely for those students who are learning from home. And we all know that teachers work extremely hard. And under these circumstances, they have been working even harder, which is pretty difficult to imagine. They're making nonstop adjustments to their teaching, thinking pretty much 24/7 how to reach every student, whether in person or remote. You can think of teachers as doing double or triple the amount of work, teaching 2 classes or more at once, in having to plan for the virtual and the in-person instruction, and also the many different levels for students within each of those groups, because we know that you may have a class in person, but each student who's there has different needs. So having to plan, for the many different levels within each of those groups. And then also in terms of the scheduling, there's constant adjustments that need to be made based on the number of students that are back in school every week. Thinking about lunch in the cafeteria, ensuring that students can eat while socially distanced. Teachers miss their students and building those relationships with each other. So I guess it's a long way of saying that teachers are exhausted. Mm-hmm. Our pre-service teachers, our student teachers, they are also learning how to teach both remotely and in person. And they are not only learning about the content and the pedagogical skill that they need to deliver that content, but they're also learning about the technological aspect, how to deliver instruction via the many different learning platforms that are being used across districts. So everyone's learning curve is super steep. And added to that, there's the whole stressor of monitoring numbers and, all the different things that I mentioned earlier, the monitoring temperatures. So teachers are really, really stressed both about their personal and professional lives. And they need to care for themselves, their families. The expectations are extremely high for teachers at this point. Teachers are tired of tirelessly working to ensure that each student continues to learn and grow both socially and academically under the most difficult circumstances. So it's been extremely challenging. And I'm sorry if I'm taking too much time.
You're not at all. I appreciate what you bring to this conversation. And are you seeing students that are second guessing whether teaching is what they should do because of all the demands that have been put on during a pandemic?
No, I think all of our pre-service teachers have stepped up in a beautiful way. As challenging as the pandemic has been in the schools, I think it has also presented some opportunities for our in-service teachers to collaborate with more experienced teachers. And, we've seen lots of creativity, and we know how amazing teachers are. And, we've seen a lot of outside the box thinking where if you do have both remote and in-person learners, teachers have divide and conquer sort of thing where, the pre-service teacher has been in charge of the in-person learning, and the more experienced teacher, the mentor, has been doing more of the remote teaching. So I think seeing the great impact that an educator can have, both academically and socially and emotionally, has solidified our students' desire to make a difference in our students' lives. Our students, our graduate students who are learning to become teachers, to become the best teachers they can be.
From training teachers also to training the leaders, the school leaders, the superintendents. I want to kind of steer the conversation to Dr. Aleman here. And Dr. Aleman, I want to ask you specifically about your program. How is Trinity's education leadership program assisting with preparing these school leaders for the impact that COVID is having?
Yeah, so we prepare current teachers who want to get a master's degree and potentially go into the principalship. So we're working with Rocio and some of our students, but this is the track of going into administration. And so right now we've been fully virtual since March, and all of our teachers, most of our teachers are in schools right now. So they're in school all day, and then they come take classes with us at night, 3 times a week. So it's an extremely intensive program. I think the way we prepare them, and we're trying to prepare them, is we're adapting just like the schools are. We're trying to introduce them to ways of thinking, ways of doing their work that is now the reality. And even in the post-COVID era, so much of this virtual learning that people are starting to learn more about is not going to go anywhere. So being adaptable to those kinds of things, not forgetting where we live, not forgetting who we serve. I think Rocio's right. So many of our students that are going into education, it's a calling more for them. A lot of people who go into educational fields, whether it's teaching or leadership, they're not really doing it for the money. They're doing it for the community building. They're doing it for the actually giving of their professional expertise, their lives, to the educating of others. And so we tried to talk to them about social justice leadership, racial equity, leading for change, leading for reform, and thinking in terms of how do we do that in a community like San Antonio. Now, the one thing that I will say that we're all kind of experiencing right now is these three. I wouldn't say there's one pandemic. I would say there's three pandemics. We have the social and political unrest that we've been living through at the national, state, local level. We have the economic pandemic that a lot of people are really, really feeling in our community. And then obviously we have COVID-19. And so I think that we try to take a more of a macro view of how to lead in education macro, but then also, how do you do that at a community level? How do you do that in a school community? And working with the parents and the families and the students that you have in your community.
Yeah, it just all fits together. By the way, I want to let our panelists know you're dealing with two journalists here whose mothers were teachers.
Yes.
So we are well aware of the fact they didn't get into it for the money. Jaelen Harris, I want to turn to you. You're a senior at Trinity. You're the president of the Student Government Association. What emotions have you gone through this year because of the pandemic? I mean, a lot of people would say a lot of your senior year was stolen from you.
That is a great question. It really hit me. Emotion.
We're having trouble hearing you again, Jaelen.
Basically, the use of the word emotion really hit me because I'm still processing that day to day. And I think I'm trying not to think of it as my senior year has been stolen from me, or there's all these outside influences that are impacting my year. What I'm really focused on is just finishing out my senior year strong and trying to make the most out of this situation, because at the end of the day, that's the best I can do. And what really has brought me joy during this time has actually been the time that I've spent with my organization and really reaching out to students and finding new ways to reach out to those students who aren't on campus. As Dr. Aleman mentioned, we are in the middle of 3 pandemics, not just one. And so specifically the social unrest that we've seen, that has definitely made its way to campus. And what I've seen from a lot of students and other student organizations is coming together around issues that we really care about. And even in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of trying to power our way through, a lot of students are still very passionate about a lot of the things that are going on around us, and they're definitely making their voices heard. So when it comes to my emotion, I can't quite put a word to it, but I'm definitely still powering through and trying, again, make the most out of what's all going on, like many other students probably are as well.
You know, we've been getting some good viewer questions.
I was just going to say, as you were speaking, Jaelen, we had a question come in for you specifically. It says, will you be an advocate for other college students to practice safe measures and encourage them to take the vaccine in order to be safe for the general good of the community? Are you going to take the vaccine? Will you be an advocate, is what they're asking.
Yes, I will. I think it's very important that we all do our part in taking care of least thought about in our community, those who are really going through it in this pandemic, most at risk. I'll definitely be an advocate for taking that vaccine, but also knowing that even with taking that, we will all still be wrapped in this situation for quite some time. So we'll need to continue to practice that physical distancing and all of these things. Yes, most definitely.
I just want to follow on to Jalen's comments and say, I think Jaelen and his peers, if there's a bright spot that I can point to, and I'm sure the professors on with us tonight can echo this, of the last year, it's that we can all feel really, really great about the future leaders that are on our college campus right now, and I'm sure on others. They are engaged, they are passionate, they are not using this as to take a breath, right? They're not taking a breather and kind of phoning it in. I mean, in all honesty, they're activated, they're engaged, they care about issues. You know, in some ways, perhaps the silver lining of this is it's activating students to take to take control of their own destiny, whether it's now on a college campus or what the world's going to look like in the future. And I think all three crises, as Dr. Aleman pointed out and Jaelen echoed, are part of that. I mean, our students are inspiring. That we deal with so much every day that's hard. And the thing that makes, I think, all of us at Trinity get up and go do it again all day, all over again, are students like Jaelen. I mean, they really, it may sound like a cliche, but they represent an incredible future for us. And it's exciting to see them evolve and develop. And I can't wait to see what they do when they leave, because this situation has clearly empowered and emboldened them. And it's refreshing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely a silver lining.
Absolutely. I got that from what Jaelen was saying, the fact that he's still processing his emotions, but he just knows he's got to plow through it right now. So, Jaelen, you add a perspective that I think is very important to this whole thing. Diana KENNEY, Interim Director of Education School Psychology Program. So we got a viewer question here I wanted to give to you first, and of course invite it to the panel as well. But this person says, kids have it hard enough just getting through school. What is all of this doing to their emotions and their learning? Do you have any idea? I mean, have you seen any evidence of what this is doing to our students?
Yeah, we're hearing a lot of reports, they're anecdotal at this point, but just informal reports of students struggling with a lot of issues related to anxiety and depression. Not being able to be with their friends is really hard on students of all ages. People need people, and so we're lacking that sort of community and that sort of one-on-one or in-person relationship. So we are hearing a lot of struggles surrounding depression, anxiety, just sort of emotional struggles in general for students of all ages. So it's definitely a huge concern. I think we're all sort of looking for ways and opportunities to continue some sort of socialization that's safe. And I don't know that we have good answers for that yet, but certainly virtual platforms are being used for more than just education. They're also being used for socialization and other types of things too, so that we can continue to connect our students and connect people to people, just because we know it's so important. And we are very concerned about the emotional well-being of students as much as we are about their academics.
And staying with you, Diana, we had a follow-up question come in from a viewer. They are asking, are public schools providing psychological counseling for kids who are struggling with isolation? Is that happening to your knowledge?
Yes, a lot of that is being done virtually still, and in some cases in person, just depending on each district is handling that differently. But students who received counseling as part of their special education program are continuing to receive that service, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person. Certainly, we have regular counseling for students who are not have a special need or in special education. We continue to provide that service as well. I know San Antonio ISD actually has a grant for counseling for students of anybody who needs counseling, and they started off offering that virtually and have moved, as I understand, to in-person counseling, and they are reaching a large group of students through the counseling program that they have there, and that's just one district that I know of that's using such a system. But that's been a high priority. It's been talked about quite a bit, reaching students, their social emotional needs, and how we can support them and provide counseling to them is definitely a hot topic and a high priority.
We have go ahead.
Sorry.
Rocio,
I was just going to say, Diana, if I may add to what you were saying, also one of the ways in which we're reaching out to the community is providing those supports to parents, because, the students' socio-emotional learning skills need to continue to be developed, but also providing information to parents on socio-emotional learning and what to do at home, and, simple strategies like breathing, what to do, take time to breathe, because we are seeing that there are some behavioral challenges with learning at home as well.
I might add to that. I think a silver lining in this is the level of communication between schools and homes is really increased during this time, to keep track of students and to make sure that we know sort of where they are and how they're doing. I know a lot of administrators have talked about they have really increased their level of home visits, or their attempts to communicate with parents and reach parents have significantly increased because of the pandemic. So I think more than ever, our communication is stronger and more present than it's been historically, which I think is a good thing. Communicating with parents and making sure that they feel informed and that they are valued, and that we're going to continue to look, reach out to them is a huge service to the community. So I think that's a great, one good positive outcome that is, we are seeing from the pandemic.
Yeah, and Dr. Delgado pointed that out too. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, you made me think about, I have a former student who's now a high school principal on the West Side, and she said exactly that. She knows like every one of her kids because they've been tracking them down. It's a big school, and typically she would know majority of them, but now because they're really going above and beyond, reaching out, trying to make contact with them, and if they're not coming into the school, to make sure that they're getting that virtual learning that they need. At a principal level, to be able to know the first names of the students, and students understand that the principal knows them.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. What can we take away from this time after we come out of this and we get back to a little bit more normalcy? What is it that we could learn from it, or what are the lessons learned that we don't want to lose? And I go back to this relationship building that is extremely important, that we're all missing right now, and that we all want to get back as soon as possible. And not forget that, if anything, education's about that. And it's about those relationships that we have and the experiences that our students, whether they're in higher ed or K-12, that really makes a difference in our organizations.
I will tell you, I want, on that same line, Enrique, a local principal also told us that the rate of dropout has decreased significantly. And that's all due to the increased communication. When the pandemic started in March, they spent more active time reaching out to students that were at risk of dropping out. And they actually decreased the number of dropouts by about half.
Wow.
Just through the communication and the continued persistence of reaching out and trying to connect with those students, they were able to, encourage them to stay in school. And I think that's a huge win, for K through 12.
Yeah, she told me the same thing. I'm almost exactly. I think we're not talking about the same person, but
this is a shout out to MacArthur High School. I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
It's not the same one. No, it's a different high school. But I think that's why they're tired. This is a principal that's exhausted, and so what kinds of support, and we need to, like, if we say we're about education and that we value education, then we need to put our money where our mouth is at. So it's or did I say that the right way? We need to value that. We need to compensate people. We need to provide supports for that, because they're going above and beyond. And when we come out of this, we don't want to lose our best educators and our best educational leaders, for burnout or whatever else there may be there. And so I am concerned about that we value who they are and what they bring to the table without burning them out and without encouraging them to retire early. That is, as a director of a program, it's good for our students because there's going to be openings. We know there are going to be openings in the principalship, and there's going to be openings in the teaching field because people are exhausted. And I think that's something we do need to think about, as we get through this.
And I want to open this up to the entire panel and even, Jaelen, as a student. We have learned so much out of necessity, whether it's collaboration among teachers that you talked about, Dr. Delgado, whether it's, reaching out and being more in touch, which both Enrique and Diana talked about. Well, what does the future look like post-pandemic? We can't go back to the way it was, can we? Is virtual learning part of it? Is all of these connections and collaborations part of it? What does the future look like? Dr. Aleman, I'll start with you.
I think if anything, we should not go back to the way it was. So
I don't think we can.
Even if we had a choice, exactly. I don't think we can. But again, I think we need to really focus on the interconnectedness, and we need to provide supports in healthcare. We need to really look at the way we provide housing, fair and equal housing for our students. People who are already struggling, and this just made it even worse. And so I think we need to really figure out ways of using our schools as they are, the centers of our community, and our higher ed institutions do the same thing, and building partnerships. It's about partnership building. It's about community building, and really having that philosophy. Now, with virtual instruction, I think higher ed will start looking more at strategic opportunities for providing virtual instruction or virtual programs, because it provides access for folks that didn't always have it. And so where we can keep virtual instruction and virtual programs, I think that'll be strategic, that what, depending on the institution, how you go about doing that?
It's similar in K through 12. One of the trends we noticed is in some of the more remote areas of South Texas, we're actually able to provide better services or services at all to areas that are so remote that they've lacked access for a long time, particularly bilingual populations who didn't have a professional in their area because they were so remote, or their towns were so small that they might not have had a bilingual school psychologist who could provide, an assessment or therapy to them. But because we are now able to do that virtually, we're actually able to serve students who weren't previously able to get that kind of, service. So that's another, to your point, it's affecting K through 12 the same way. I think it's something that should remain because it has provided some good opportunities for those kinds of situations.
We just had go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's fundamentally going to make change. There will be fundamental shifts in higher education. There will be some things that some of us return to and embrace. Like I think the idea of a residential campus where people are highly interconnected, people will, if you had that opportunity before, it'll only be intensified later. But Dr. Aleman is right. We expect that we see data, national data, that students are interested in online learning, maybe not as their only means for obtaining a degree, but as an integral part of the delivery of that. But also changes to kind of cultural perceptions about higher education that were in play pre-pandemic have been intensified. Mm-hmm. So this idea that a higher education needs to return a value, that every dollar you spend obtaining a degree has to have some sort of return on investment for the student. Concerns about student debt. All of those are things that are going to intensify pressure on higher education to make adjustments and changes in the model. So we anticipate seeing that intensify in the coming years. And then, Dr. Aleman mentioned this earlier, the others echoed it. I think it's going to be incredibly important that we begin to break down the silos in higher education and K-12 all the way through with healthcare and community and social services to look at a more integrated approach. On a lot of college campuses, health services and counseling services aren't even integrated. So, we've got to integrate those things around student success so that we can begin to look at holistically, how do we prepare a student for lives of meaning and purpose? And how do we get them from day one to day two successfully by working together? So integration is going to be the word of the day, technology and value. Those are the things I see coming to higher education.
We've just had a lot of really great viewer questions come in. I want to ask this one to the panel. Because of learning and emotional issues, are public school leaders considering skipping STAR tests, or perhaps the focus on STAR tests, to focus on their emotional learning and traditional core subjects instead? Anyone want to try that one?
Well, as of right now, STAR test is still scheduled as planned, so they don't have the option of not preparing students for it. I think they are trying to balance the social emotional needs of students and making sure that they keep those on the priority list, but they aren't able, based on just the state standards right now, to take a break from preparing for the STAR test, unfortunately.
Go ahead.
I'm not an educator. I'm still a college student, but one thing that I think I have noticed is that a lot of educators are faced with the question of how do we meet learning outcomes? How do we make sure that our students, from day one of class into the last day of class, learning all the things that they need while tempering what's going on in the world around us? And I think that pandemic has only highlighted this. It did not create it. I think as you mentioned earlier about a holistic approach to the student, there's a lot more that goes into those test scores. There's a lot of social factors, economic factors that go into those test scores. So I think a moment like this is really challenging us to invent new ways to meet learning outcomes that may depart from older models that really should have been continuing to question anyway. So the question of what the future will look like, I will hope that a lot of the lessons that we're learning, a lot of the issues that are being highlighted, that we don't forget about them when we're allowed to go back outside. The way I believe some of you mentioned how dropout rates increased by half. That is amazing when you really think about it as a product of communication. Things like that are lessons that I hope that we all carry with us, more students along instead of leaving so many behind by factors that we can definitely be thinking about, because in a moment like this, we're forced to. And some of the biggest change, in my opinion, is not often by choice, but by force. And I think this moment is definitely letting us know a lot of things about ourselves and the future that we want to build.
What our priorities are.
Jaelen hit on it. I mean, the dropout rate or the connections that were being made were not because of the test. It wasn't because of the accountability system. It was, again, this humanizing aspect of the work that we're trying to do. So we were for high expectations. I want children to learn. I want them to have rigorous curriculum. Is it testing going to make that happen right now, given the fact that we've been living through this since March? I think we really need to humanize the issue, and we need to, continue to work with our students, provide as a rigorous and academic program as we can, bring in the teachers to be a partner in that, because they know what they're doing. They're working day and night to make that happen. They have to be at the table for that. And I think testing is one of those things that we really, really need to take a hard look after the fact. Right now, it's a no-brainer to me. Right now, we shouldn't even be, placing that as part of the equation for schools to live by.
And what I would add is that if we are moving forward, because the state, seems like we are going to move forward with the test, then we need to keep asking ourselves the why. Why are we doing it, and how are we using it's our why, which is about the priorities, right? Like, how are we using the tests that we're giving to our students? Are those tests really reflective of what we want them to learn? Mm-hmm. Or not? And then if it's not reflective of what we really want them to learn, socio-emotional learning skills, then let's revise what we do, the assessments that we use, and what we use them for, basically.
One of our viewers has a question just for you, Rocio Delgado. Are you now teaching education students to teach remotely? Because that sounds like we're not going back to normal or what school used to be like. So are you teaching them different techniques in how to teach remotely?
I am learning myself. I will confess, I said that it's been a steep learning curve for all of us, myself included. It is a combination. Our teacher education students are in the campus right now. They are in a local district. So it's a combination, hybrid learning. I do teach some classes remotely, but we're also in the campus working with students there.
We have about 10 minutes left in this live stream, and we have quite a bit of viewer questions to get through, so I want to get to some of these. One person is wondering if any schools, or Trinity specifically, are considering fast-tracking programs amid the pandemic, eliminating classes that are not specifically related to the student's program or major. Tess, do you want to try and answer that one for us?
I can. That's kind of a constant process for university curriculum councils, is to constantly review and look at curriculum. But no, we're not looking at that at Trinity. How it gets delivered, how can we, I will tell you this, what we're looking at is how can we accelerate our four-year graduation rate and our retention rates. And there are a whole lot of things that go into that beyond just which classes do you have to take. And so, we're pretty confident in the value of the curriculum, but there are a lot of other dependencies that can impact that. And so we are aggressively looking at, can we get the things out of the way that are not value added, that impede a student's ability to graduate in 4 years or earlier even. Mm-hmm. There are things you can do, like can you accept more advanced placement credits, things like that. So those are the ways we're looking at it, but we do not, like K-12, not going to water down or ameliorate the value, the foundation of the education. We're just going to get the stuff that doesn't matter out of the way. And I, something was discussed earlier, we know that testing is a lagging indicator. I spent years in healthcare, and one of the things we understood is, checking someone's A1C is important, right? If you're diabetic. But what was really more impactful was investment in health promotores and people that spent time reaching out to, educating, connecting, helping people connect as master learners. We see that on college campuses, and I'm sure in K through 12 as well. That's where you start to really impact people's health outcomes. It's also where you're going to improve people's educational outcomes. And so those are the things we focus on, not removing, classes from our curriculum.
Another viewer question, and I'll open this up to the panel because I'm not sure if this has been discussed or not, but this is a 73-year-old teacher with pre-existing conditions wondering when they'd be able to get the vaccine. Are teachers considered frontline workers? We talk a lot about priorities. Any idea where teachers fall in where the vaccinations will take place?
I can tell you that for faculty, our understanding in a private higher ed environment is that we'll be considered part of the general population. I do know that we've heard from Metro Health that healthcare workers and workers and residents of nursing homes and residential care facilities, they're prioritized first. And just looking at the numbers of vaccines available and the numbers of those individuals, the rest of us, including our amazing teachers that are on the front line and faculty, are probably behind that. But it's a great question that you can track with Metro Health, and they share information as they have it about kind of what the order of things is as recommended by DSHS.
Yeah, I don't know where they're at. I don't know where teachers fall on the priority, but they should be closer to the top. If you're going to open up the economy and you want people to have to go back to work and you want some kind of normalcy, we need adults, professionals that are in as safe an environment as possible to work with our young people, and you can't have it both ways. This is part of the humanizing aspect that I think that we miss sometimes. We're wanting teachers to come back, but we're not providing the support that they need to do what they're good at, what they were trained to do. And so that wherever they're at in the priority list, I think we need to move them up as close to the top as we can.
The whole idea about opening schools is to get students in class so that parents who are essential workers can go to work too. For our faculty, and I know for teachers in K through 12, teaching your own children and juggling childcare and family and dependent care and trying to teach two kinds of classes, hybrid and in person, it's overwhelming. So absolutely agree with Dr. Aleman. It's kind of part and parcel of opening the economy, right? Keeping our schools healthy and open and robust.
Yeah, I've always said that I don't get, in my opinion, the whole health versus the economy, they should not be juxtaposed. They should be together. We're talking about you can't have one without the other. And so that's what I think we're talking about too. And certainly education is part of that as well.
We talked a little bit about students there at Trinity not dropping out of the program because of their commitment to the community. Dr. Aleman, you touched on that. And this question came in kind of related, but I know we've done previous reports on this. Are principals seeing a lot of retirements from their teachers because of COVID and the pressures being put on them?
I think that's the $1 million question that we're about to find out. When I talk to superintendents and principals, that's what they're hearing. I think December 31st is when the next, calendar year starts, when if you're eligible, you can retire at that point, from TRS. So I think superintendents, finding substitutes right now when a teacher gets sick, there's not any substitutes, right? You cannot run a school system without the people that help you teach. And that's just part of the humanity part that I keep talking about, that if for any other reason, we can't run a school without the professionals in there, and they should be part of the process. They should be part of the decision-making as much as possible. And we need to take care of them as much as possible, because I think, if I had to bet on it, we're going to have a bunch of people, if they can and they're eligible, they're going to start looking at retirement, just because, if you're in that situation like the caller or the questioner, 73-year-old with pre-existing conditions, and you're not providing the support to go back in the classroom, why would you risk it? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a real issue that schools are going to have to deal with across San Antonio and across the U.S.
So this time has flown by. We've got about 4 minutes left. I want to open it up to the panel now, and I want to ask each of you, and we'll go down the line here, kind of your closing thoughts, like what you want people to take away